see almost a full auditorium today. Of course, I think the topic is something that's very, very interesting. So just a few, just setting the context, like I mentioned, Sitara has been doing this seminar series every semester. Many of you do attend, and we've had an absolutely amazing series of talks semester after semester, basically made up by the speakers who come. And some of you, if you've attended, you would know that the kind of speakers we've had. We had a very wide diversity of people speaking, both from within IIT and many people from outside IIT. I would like to also just say that organizing something like that is not possible only for one individual. So there is a team of PAs that works, and they are just beginning. But through the semester, over the last 2-3 semesters that I have been coordinating this, it's absolutely not possible to do something like this without the PAs, and I'm quite sure. I'd just like to identify Prathamesh. Aditesh is not here. IRB, who does the communication for us, and also Abhishek, who unfortunately is not here because he has a family emergency. But something like this cannot be put together without the help of a large team. And of course the Sitara backup team, students who help out informally, faculty who contribute, and of course the office staff who organize the logistics and stuff like that. So before we begin, I'd like to thank all of them for that. Also, just to announce that next week we have Dr. Aswati Ravindran, who teaches at KIFR. She's part of the Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education. She'll be here, same time, same auditorium. She'll be speaking on the gendered nature of science and technology, and she'll be taking examples from biological sciences to be speaking about what she's going to be speaking. So please do mark your calendars, please do come. We'll send out the announcements certainly as soon as it is done. The other quick announcement is that the other thing that Sitara has been doing, among many other things, is we also organize a second seminar series on wildlife in India that is done in association with the DST GIC Hub. We're starting that tomorrow as well. There's going to be a set of film screenings tomorrow. This will happen in LC 202 at the same time at 5:30, and we are doing that every week as well. We invite people in Bombay who are working on different aspects of wildlife to come and speak. So you're please welcome to come for that as well, and that has also been a very interesting series over the last semester. So with those basic announcements, I'd just like to thank Niranjan for agreeing to come and agreeing to make this presentation. We've been discussing this for a while. I remember talking to him about a semester ago, and of course he agreed. He's part of the Institutional Review Board, as you may have seen in his CV. Also the IEC, he was a part of the Institute Ethics Committee, and he's of course you will see, you would have seen in his bio, and you will see formally extremely multi-talented and many things to his credit. He's probably also the fittest person on campus, certainly fittest among faculty. There's no doubt about that. About 15 days ago when I wrote to him, inviting him, he immediately responded saying, I am climbing mountains in the Alps. So I thought, itna turant answer aa gaya, very prompt. So internet is working everywhere. And then of course, this person has his priorities very right. In December he's climbing the mountains and we are sitting here doing some work. But he's an extremely fantastic rock climber. And actually I just watched before coming. There's a small clip on Badami. Yeah, so it's a little 4-minute clip where he's trying to climb a very steep and difficult rock face, and it's quite amazing, so do look out. And more importantly, or perhaps equally important, is the fact that he has been a very important part of this ethics related things in IIT Bombay. So like I'm sure he'll be talking about that, but this has become an increasing concern in research of the processes of how we do the ethics, permissions and stuff like that, but also the larger fundamental issues why ethics are so important. And I think it's in Sitara we've been grappling with this. I think faculty, even otherwise on campus, PhD students in particular, have to go through the process of getting the ethics clearances, and it's a challenge both in terms of the larger philosophy, so to say, but also perhaps the institutional mechanisms by which we get these permissions. So I think it's a great start to this semester for us, because it's a very important theme of research, for research, and I don't think there could be a better person than Niranjan for this. So Niranjan, thank you so much. The stage is yours. Thanks, Pankaj.
I think this mic works, otherwise I'll take the handheld. Yeah. So thank you very much, Pankaj. This is actually a very timely topic, because 6 months back when you said it was quite a green topic, because actually the topic has blossomed, and what was like one tree has now become a forest, as you will see in the first 5 to 10 slides. The first 10 to 15 minutes I'll be talking about case studies that I've said in my abstract. Case studies are examples we learn from people senior to us, the big people. So we'll see who these big people are. The first 15 minutes will feel like a okay, before I get to the case studies, first, what is research ethics? Research ethics is a very vast area. There are no frameworks or single document like a scientific single document from where I can pick up. So I've collated things. First is basic. Any doctoral student graduating from IIT Bombay would know what constitutes authorship. Should a doctoral student be first author or last author? I mean, can it ever happen that a doctoral student is not the first author? You published a conference paper, can you subsequently publish it in refereed journal? These are all questions that in your first year you would have figured out. And there is a classic website, the Academy of Management. They have a series of 6 or 8 videos. Each of them is like 4 to 5 minutes. So instead of me summarizing, I could do that. I could spend 2 hours explaining all these things, because I am intimately aware of this. But I will not waste that time. This slide will be shared with you. You can go through this. This will clear your basics. And this is not an issue that at IIT we are really facing, because this is pretty basic. When I told in the abstract that ethics are often misunderstood and or not practiced, it was just a euphemism. Everybody understands. Wherever it has not been practiced, it has been due to fairly malicious reasons, as the case studies will explain. So the reason I am sharing this is, one aspect of research ethics is how do you handle the publications. You collected data, who do you author with? Is it okay to exchange authorship? You put my name on one paper, I do it. There are many people who do it, but these are not things that can be done, controlled or monitored. These are all left to individuals, because institutes as an institute we can't monitor that. But if you want to be aware, educated about these things, there is an excellent resource. This is about 10 years old, the Academy of Management, which is for the entire management field. They have picked it up mostly from the APA, Association of Psychology something. I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know the full name. So these are standard references which you can go through. There is other aspect of scientific practice which is not coming under this dimension, is once you have collected, that's where scientific rigor and scientific ethics come. To what extent can you play with the data? If you are a physicist, supposedly if there is the value of G is 9.806, it is 9.806, that's all, there is no grey area around it, it's absolute. But in social sciences, context is important. Context can be incorporated for true scientific reasons. Sometimes it could also be due to some not so justifiable reasons. That is called data massaging. How do you handle data? So we'll take a few examples with which it will become clear. One of my classics, for which I have got an exclusive slide, is a practice called p-hacking, or to put it in another adage, if you torture data sufficiently, it will confess to everything. You would have heard of this. I heard of this 15 years back when I was a student. If you spend sufficient time with data, for those of you who follow hypothetico-deductive research, in hypothetico-deductive research, theory informs and builds your hypothesis. You have just one chance to test the hypothesis, right? You just have one chance. You wrote a hypothesis, whether the data validates it or not, but you don't have to stop there. Practically, what we do, this hypothesis is not supported. Okay, we can change the language. So this is the domain of research practice and ethics. To what extent do you play with data? There are some unpleasant things called data outliers. So beautiful model, it is fitting nicely, but there are 2 or 3 outliers. How do we handle them? No, there are no black and white answers. Outliers should be treated as part of data. Now when I teach in School of Management, I have 120 students. There are times when I get very excellent feedback, but there's one student, a couple of them who said this is the best course ever taught in SOM, and there will be one odd person who said this is the worst class ever taught. Now incorporating it, will it actually lead me to the truth? These are all difficult things. So in this presentation I will only talk about things that are a little grey, because black and white you should not copy from the guy next door, I don't have to teach that. Those of you who have ethics will follow. I'll only talk about some things that are a bit grey. We'll come there in detail. Then comes the role of IRB. Actually, there is a whole plethora of research ethics issues which are not covered by the IRB. IRB is primarily or solely focused on, it should not be that way. That is a debate I am opening because some of you will be future IRB members, and hopefully through the faculty members here this word will also spread or percolate to the IRB. It's time that we look at the larger issues. There are much bigger issues that we need to be concerned about, very distressed about, as the next couple of slides will unfold. But as things stand, IRB is only focused on the protection of individuals. After that you fetch data, you create data, sitting in your room you imagine experiments and fill data. We don't have mechanisms to check that. We are not doing that. We ought to do that because those are big issues. Currently, IRB only focuses on the protection of individual research participants' interests. So, are they being harmed? Is the research value commensurate to the harm that you are putting them to? Is the governing principle of IRB. So, I will spend a little bit of time on IRB, but to give the context, IIT lived with something called Institute Ethics Committee for about 7-8 years. The atrocious thing is the Institute Ethics Committee was governed by the ICMR guidelines, Indian Council of Medical Research. In no sensible place would medical research govern social sciences research because we are completely different. So about 4 or 5 years IEC ran and social scientists had great difficulty because a doctor is sitting there and asking questions which social science does not make sense. So a lot of us from HSS management, we kept whining, and finally the institute said we will form a separate IRB. So I think we are one of the few institutes which has a parallel IEC and IRB. So institutional review board was formed to help out, not help out, to monitor the research practice of social sciences. So it was a huge benefit for us. That was the version 1 which started in 21, which is the version you still see. But right now it is undergoing with the new convener who has taken over, Professor Swati Patanda. Actually, of all the people, we need to thank her because she was the first one who gave me an opportunity to introspect and take a honest look at everything that is happening, prepare, and she opened the opportunity for me to revisit the entire scientific logic of our IRB and actually conduct workshops for the IRB members. That requires a lot of intellectual courage because when I speak the truth. I don't mince words. If there is something wrong, I will point out. So she gave this opportunity. IRB members were very open to the discussion. So that's how the new version that you will see, which will hopefully come in the next couple of months, will be very smooth. The current IRB has a lot of pain points. I have constantly, I am facing colleagues who keep asking me what happened to my proposal, what happened, and I say mine is also stuck for 2 months for no logical reason. It's the way it is. I am trying my best. So now collectively the IRB members are currently good. But the point is, as I said in the abstract, it is currently a bit subjective. It depends on who's on the IRB, who is the reviewer to whom your paper goes. It should not be like that. It should be based on scientific principles. It should not matter whether I happen to handle your proposal or someone else. So to do that, we should have a scientific basis. Otherwise, it's my opinion. If I say running a marathon is easy peasy because my first marathon I ran it sub 4 hours. Sub 4 hour marathon is something that people work for years and years and still don't accomplish. But it's an opinion. If you have a factual thing, a marathon run in 4 hours, that is objective. Easy, oh it's not so difficult, but they don't make sense, right? Why I am saying this is I have seen several cases where colleagues say, oh, but this does not seem ethical to me. Okay, that's your opinion, but do you have any literature backing? Can you provide examples from other, literature where this is acceptable or not? There must be some basis. Otherwise, there are 100 of us sitting here. Each of us has our own opinion. So it cannot be opinion based. It must be based on certain logic, for which fortunately everything is available on internet. Today it's a very level world. What is happening in the US, what's happening in Australia, every other's ethics committee practices, everything is visible to everyone who takes the pains to actually read things. So that is one part. That is one part of research ethics. Okay, I'll cover each of them in some time. We'll start with one classic thing, which how many of you do not know Francesca Gino, who is not aware of this case? Quite a sizable. Okay, so I'll give you this next 10 minutes will be like a movie, like a Robin Cook movie. Very scandalous, it will take you through twists and turns. But it is so shocking, and it's also very personal for me because I work in the space of behavioral operations management. So I look at psychologists and apply psychology, behavioral economics into my field. Francisco Gina is like 45, 46 years old. She is my contemporary. She was doing a postdoc when I was a postdoc. So from that time I am looking up to her as a role model, because in my life I published 3 top tier journal papers. Maybe in the rest of my life I will publish another 3. Each of them has taken me about 5 years of work. Francisca used to publish 3 to 4 to 5 papers in 1 year, of that level. And I was truly in awe for her. I thought, there are such superhumans on the planet. Where are we? Despite all the best efforts I can publish. I used to openly tell it in my class. See, in the entire School of Management's history, there have been only 3 such papers. Those happen to be mine. And the entire department has not in the last 25 years published. Francisca alone, every year she is publishing 4 or 5 papers. And now, if you see her CV, she has about 100 papers today. And once you become the editor of one of those journals, like, world's your oyster. She was earning close to $1 million. That's her salary, and her speaking fees is about $50,000 to $1 lakh for 1 hour. Where does all that come from? The value comes because she is a brilliant researcher. Dan Ariely, no social scientist should say I have not heard of Dan Ariely, because living, he is the number 2 guy in behavioral economics. David Kahneman is alive, Amos Tversky died. These are 2 people who are the fathers of behavioral economics. After that, living contemporary, he is only 56 years old. Dan Ariely, he wrote Predictably Irrational. When I was a doctoral student, these are the books that really inspired me to. Now, these books, the other book that is written is, these are all, if you go to any airport and all, you find these books. These people are credited with making psychology, which is a boring academic research, palatable to the common man. The word they use is they made psychology sexy, because it is provided to you in nice books, easy to understand. And their core research area, at least for Francisca, even to a large extent Dan Ariely. Francisca is a Tandon chair professor at Harvard Business School. Dan Ariely is at Fuqua Business School, Duke University. Their core research area is honesty. They study about dishonesty, how we can fix this. Then, there is a group of researchers called Data Collada. Now, the things that I am saying here, these are of extreme high value to you. If I were developing a course curriculum, those of you who are doing communications course and all, you must look at this blog called Data Collada. This is run by 3 very high quality researchers from University of Pennsylvania, one guy from Germany, another guy from US. The kind of data sleuthing they do, if you massage data, if you play with data, these people are able to, they have the technical skill. I don't have that much technical skill. If you altered something in Excel has that chain of evidence, they can catch you. They have this ability to sniff when something is amiss, when you have played with data. So Francisca Gina was a star. Some call her a rising star, but in my view she was already a star. Who can publish 100 such papers? A lifetime achievement of entire India will not produce what she has produced when it comes to top tier output. Too good to be true. Turned out to be too good to be true. So one after another, there were 4 papers that people, when you read papers, many of these things were too good to be true. So when we do empirical research, half the time my hypotheses don't hold. I struggle, I feel disappointed, but that is real science. In their case, so one of their brilliant experiments they did was, in one paper they had 4 studies. 2 of the studies were found to be fraudulent. Travel expenses, they found that when you submit the form, if you fill the undertaking that I will fill the form honestly, if you do it at the top versus if you do it at the bottom, they found that if you write I will fill the form honestly at the top, you are less likely to inflate your claims than if you put it at the bottom. Now this is something any passerby you can explain this. It's so simple and so eye-opener. These are the things, the book is full of such live experiment-based thing, but it is too good to be true. Some of the other time somebody will look a clever doctoral student, somebody who's inquisitive, will look at the data. They looked at the data and flagged it to data collector. So data collector's job half the time, they do it for their passion, they're regular business school professors, they dug into this paper. They asked for raw data. At that time Francisco thought, I'm God, so she gave the data. Now, this is being recorded, so I'll only say what things that I've learned on LinkedIn and stuff. So I believe she provided the data to data collector. Data collector analyzed the data, and they found that if you want to have high and low effect, they just moved data points. So what you see as red crosses, those were the fishy data, where participant ID were either duplicated, or it was evident that participant name was altered. Like if Harvard students had participated in the experiment, they were supposed to write their which course they are. In many of these data which were found fishy, they had just written Harvard, Harvard, Harvard. All this smelt something was wrong. So they flagged 8 points that are problematic. If you remove the 8 points, if you only see the blue, the effect size is not there. Only if you include the reds. So it was a case of very juvenile type of data thing. They did that, and then the outcome was they found similarly Dan Ariely. This experiment that Dan Ariely submitted one of those studies within the same paper. They did instead of doing it in the classroom, they did a field study. They worked with a auto insurance company where these claims were to be made. So data came from the company, which is like it's quite rare in psychology research. Most of the time we get participants to the lab and do it. So this was a field experiment which increased the credibility of the study so much. But end of the day, after this thing came up, who generated the data? Dan Ariely said, I got it from the auto company to whom I consulted. You asked the auto company, they said there was no such discussion. We never provided the data. Or there was no agreement for research, and we have not provided data. The data that Dan Ariely might have access does not fit with what has been published here. So we saw one huge, this was within business school community, this was like, if 1, 2, and that way they studied, I think 4 papers. They wrote it called, in a series called Cluster Fake series, 1, 2, 3, 4. Each of them is a brilliant reading. If you like mystery novels, those are fiction. This is real science. The systematic way in which the data collector scientists analyze things objectively without using, I'm being a little dramatic, they are not so dramatic. From a pure scientific perspective, they analyzed, and anyone who reads it will be very convinced there is this is a case of academic fraud. Why it is important is, you would like to know what does it mean for me. I'll tell you in a while, but point being, 2 of the stars in our field have engaged in fraud. Proven or not, time will tell, but from the face of it, I bet any one of you who will read data collector will be convinced. But the point is, the questions it raises on social sciences at large. Parallel exercises have been done on replication. Social sciences is facing what is called replication crisis. Less than 10% of psychology studies are replicating. People claim results, when someone else tries to replicate, they don't have credibility and confidence in our findings. On top of that, if some stars from the best of the best university of the world turn out to be the studies, so many studies have been built on those 4 core papers. It has a cascading effect on the entire field. So it is shocking. But that's not the end of it. I thought that is shocking, that is bad enough. This happened about 6 months back. May, June is when this came in the news. LinkedIn was full of it and all that. Now, as if that were not enough, Francisca denied she has done any wrongdoing. She turned back and sued data collector. And Shrikant Datar, because she was put on unpaid leave for 2 years. Now Shrikant Datar is the dean of Harvard Business School. He and the committee, whoever, the committee members, we look up to those people because these are the people who have been writing HBR articles, and since we were students, big names in the field. That committee said this is a clear case of fraud. Actually, they hired outside forensic experts. Harvard paid $500,000 whatever, got forensic experts to do all this data trail matching. This is where it becomes relevant for you. The story, how we handle data, how we preserve data, we don't think about it, but You don't know 10 years later what will come back and bite you. That's the point. That is the place where I also started to think. Suppose somebody looks at my doctor. Fortunately, I have everything on my data is cheap, and my data is so close to my heart. My doctors will research data from there. Everything is in my email. I don't delete anything. But suppose they wanted to, do I even have records of it? There could be people who don't store it. What if I had not stored it? No, that was the question that came to me. So anyway, the forensic experts came and they found that, as Collada had implied, the actual problem was 5 times 10 times more than what they had uncovered. They had uncovered 4 papers, but they felt the problem is actually rot is much deeper. That's what the forensic experts found. But Francesca turned back and said, it's a gender thing, I've been treated unfairly because I'm a woman. Similar cases happened with someone else, XYZ. You treated them differently, you can't fire me, I'm the only earning mother. I think she has 3 or 4 kids or something. So I'm a helpless woman, you have exploited me, not treated me fairly, something of that sort. So she sued them for $25 million. Beta Collada, immediately they had to get legal help and all, but you can look at the academic fraternity, how they reacted. In 1 day, 2 days, I was monitoring it. I did not pay because there is international charges and all that, but in about 48 hours, they were able to raise that $500,000 for their legal fees, because they have to be protected. The universities don't protect them. This is their pastime work. Anyway, the key takeaway is you read this because from a scientific perspective, it is very interesting. You know, we know data analysis, but how a third person can actually catch when you play with data. I thought this was one huge thing, but the story didn't end there. Okay. While that was happening, in parallel, just a few weeks later, there was another big name that came up. Stanford's president had to resign because of flaws found in research. Now, flaw is a euphemism because it could be research malpractice, but whether you use fraud or flaws is a wordplay, depends on who does it. They found that he's another big shot guy who was studying Alzheimer disease. Alzheimer, cancer is where the big money is, pharma companies, that network. They found the background again is important. Okay, the outcome was Stanford also found a committee. They conducted some 50 interviews, 50,000 documents, and found that not 1 but 5 of his papers were serious problems where he was the principal author. But the interesting thing is, they did not say, if you see the Wall Street Journal, New York Times heading, they would not say scientific fraud, but they said there are serious problems. But if you read the kind of problems that are there, images were altered, these are all fraud, whether you do it or your postdoc did it. But they did not 1 but 5 papers starting from 2009. But the interesting thing, 2 interesting things there were, and he knew about the problem in 2009 and didn't do anything about it. These are all huge research ethics issues, but I mean, this may not be a big deal if it happened in some, I don't want to give names, but recently there is some Savita University which is known for retraction, and they're number 1 in the country or something for retraction, if it happens there. But here is Stanford's president. This is where, standards and processes emanate. Next, whatever committee is formed by the president, right? Who forms the committees? It's the top management. So, if your general is found to be a coward in a military setup, what will happen to the rest of the organization? So, he knew about the problem, he didn't do about it. That's not the most striking thing for me. The other striking thing was this study was very influential because social sciences, end of the day, it won't kill people. People don't take it very seriously. Good for us, especially business research. Managers don't read our papers, fine for us. When you are dealing with Alzheimer's, Genentech is one of the big companies. We study it in our business school. I've used that case study. They don't talk in millions. All the investment money is in billions, sometimes touching trillions, maybe. They're like, Genentech will be bigger than many small African countries. Big companies, they use this study. There was a lot of monetary angle here. That's one part. The most striking thing is, how did this fraud come up? There are some people who say, for senior scientists running busy labs, it may be difficult to scrutinize every piece of data produced by more junior researchers they supervise. This is a common refrain that when very big people are caught, they give this example. But to me, this defies logic. You can't take all the benefits, but when something bad happens, you put everything on your. You should not take credit. If you are unable to scrutinize everything, don't have your name on the paper. That's how there are people who have published 1,000 papers. Their writing pace is 5 times more than my reading pace. I can't read 1,000 papers in a year. 1,000 is a lot for me. There are people who, 1,000 or 500, some such number, I can't read at the pace that they are writing papers. I can't remember, so if you are giving your name for everything and if some fraud happens, you ought to acknowledge it. Our IRB is not touching on any of these sensitive issues. This is what, as we progress, I feel instead of policing the submissions that come, we should be looking at the larger issues, because these have happened. So sometimes they say, oh, we are very big. I was just running the lab. I did not actually deal with the data. Then what did you do? If you are just running the lab, you don't deserve authorship. You go back to the first video series. Does that deserve authorship if you are the head of a laboratory? No, you provided the physical infra. The government gave you money, you set up the lab, but have you provided intellectual contribution to the paper? So if there are 10 authors on a paper, all 10 of them are equally responsible for everything that is there in the paper, because you cannot selectively, when things are going fine, when you took $100,000 speaking fees, you are fine with it. That's what Francesca says when she denies any wrongdoing. She says, my RAs did it. What incentive does an RA has to manipulate data in a way that your hypothesis is supported? In fact, technically the RA should not know what your hypothesis is. Why on earth will they shift 10 from here to here so that this effect size is higher? These people will claim more honestly. You remove this data and put it on top. That's what they did, so that the effect size is there. Why will an RA do that? What incentive do they have? Anyway, that happened with Stanford, and I thought that is the end of it, but the saga is unfolding as we speak. Last 2-3 days news. So Claudine Gay, the president of Harvard University, had to resign, not because of her so you know why she resigned, right? She has plagiarized her doctoral thesis, and the irony there is Harvard is known for at least in common knowledge that they are a very ethical university. If their students do malpractice, in IIT you don't get penalized that much. Maximum will get an FR in that course if you plagiarize something in an exam, if you copy. Then you are chucked out of the university. About 100 Harvard students have been chucked out of the university for similar charges. What has she done? She has plagiarized in her own doctoral thesis. Compared to what I explained previously, to me this is chicken feed. This is not really such a big deal. Many of the times what she has done is in her doctoral thesis. She is again not a very super senior to me. She is maybe did her PhD maybe 5-6 years before me, or around the same time as me, or maybe 5-6 years before me. Which means what we knew in India 15-20 years back, for us it was common knowledge, as if she wouldn't know that. But let's give that benefit of doubt, she doesn't know. So what she's done is she's taken a couple of paragraphs verbatim. If you take anything verbatim, you're supposed to put it in quotes and give page number. I learned it as a first year doctoral student. Back 15 years back, everybody knew it. Somebody who's been a tenured professor at some other very big name university before she moved to Harvard as the president of the Harvard University, not Harvard Business School, not Harvard Medical School, the president of Harvard University, as she doesn't know, but she's a social scientist. She's studied about black leadership and things like that. So when plagiarism cases come, in her letter she says, because I'm black and I'm a woman and I've touched upon the sensitive, the white lobby is actually attacking us, there could be some truth in it. We are not here to do value judgment. Mainly all these things lead to what we should learn from it. I'll come there. When you read data collected, actually you will be so much better informed how you should handle data and those things. But the story, how pack of cards stuffed up one after another. I thought at least now the movie will end. Now movie is taking another chapter, which is she was okay, she resigned yesterday, before yesterday. There was one vocal person who was behind her that she should step down, Actually, she stepped down for two reasons. Her Congress statement regarding anti-Semitism and plagiarism. The anti-Semitism was nothing illegal, they could not catch her, they caught her on plagiarism and did it. The lady next, you forget her name, Mary Oxnam. She was a tenured professor at Harvard. She was the one behind, lobbying that she should step down. Okay, step down. Now the spotlight is on her. She has admitted to plagiarizing her own doctoral student. She was a tenured MIT professor. Now the spotlight is on. She has acknowledged. She's done it. Not in a big way. Personally, if you ask me, see once things start. So we are all writing your doctor's thesis. I'm very sure I have not plagiarized even one paragraph. I'm safe, but I'm just lucky because I don't think it's a big deal. Maybe some of my close friends, 1 or 2 paragraphs they may have plagiarized. It's not such a big deal to me, but technically she is in the flaw. You pointed fingers, now the spotlight is on her. Okay. You think the story ends here? No. Now Bill Ackman, the billionaire husband of that Neri, she said, you touched my wife, that she's been dragged into the fray. Now I'll scrutinize all MIT professors, starting with MIT Sally Kornbluth, who is the president of MIT, who is accused of plagiarism. She will have to step down, or probably she already stepped down. Now he's not stopping there. He will now investigate all the faculty at MIT or whatever department she is in, architecture and design department. All those faculties, thesis, everything will be checked. If you check everything, you will find there will be some cases. The point is, up to now, okay, this is not the end of the story. Again, yesterday, this is what 8th January news. So this lady, whatever gay, she stepped down. The new one who was supposed to come, he is accused of conflict of interest, of being on board of 2 major drug giants, is earning more than 1 million. Now, point for me is, there was a time when I used to look up to these big universities. No, even in IRB, I have made this statement. अरे हार्वर्ड को प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम है? Because there were some absurd rules that IEC had. I used to say the whole world is doing. What's your problem? Now I can't honestly say that because sometimes my colleagues are right. Because in IIT, I don't think my faculty colleagues, anyone is doing this sort of thing. We don't have that pressure. We don't have incentive to publish in top journals and all that. I don't think my colleagues, any one of them is doing what they have done. Maybe little contribution or big contribution to paper, that is a grey area, all that may be there. But this sort of data fudging, plagiarism, I don't know. The reason is, 2 years back I was very confident. Columbia website hai aise, so we can adopt it. But now I am not that confident. So in future whatever I speak, I will only speak based on, on face value it should be logical to us because which all universities did I name? Starting with Dan Ariely, Duke University, Harvard Business School, Harvard University President, Stanford President, MIT President. Baki ko check kiya to we don't know how many more skeletons will unearth. The irony is, these have IRBs for the last 5-10 years predating our IRB. Despite that, where will we develop practices? Like I told you, I knew as a doctoral student that whenever something is quoted verbatim, I have to put it in quotes and give page number. Where did I find? I read up to these big people, because these people have, Harvard Business School is like 100 years old. It's one of the oldest, biggest, big business school. So everything, practices, best practices, case study methodology, everything we learn from them. We hold them in so much respect. If people do, faculty development programs, 3-day, 10-day workshop, they put it on their CV that Harvard alumnus. That's the kind of brand effect we carry. This brand is so shallow. They can promote such people as star faculty, and none of them caught them on their own. It was external agencies that found out. That Stanford thing I forgot to tell you, that Stanford president, Alzheimer's that I told you, that fraud, how it was caught. You should know that, you should be curious about these things. You spend a lot of time on social media as scientists. You should be curious how they found this, who found that is. Like in IIT we have Insight magazine, something equivalent to that, Stanford Daily, run by undergrads. They caught this issue and they dug their heels in. And that's how the institute could not, and they tried to tell that editor to keep it aside. He didn't keep quiet. It was published or it was, as per our evidence, this figure is altered. And then Stanford was supposed to do it. Stanford, where in the pecking order Stanford stands. So the point is, after all this big drama, the issues that we discussed at IRB are actually chicken feed. It's only because IRB is given a role that we have to approve things. Okay, we sit on a kind of, when you're in that role, I've seen this happen. It's a basic, very fundamental psychology thing that when you're in a position of kind of power, unequal power relationship, you start to exercise that power. You start to have questions. Ye kiya, incentive 300 rupees, बहुत कम लग रहा है. It should be 400. There are experiments that are done with 30 rupees incentive or 0 incentive. There's no uniformity there. So the IRB issues are much smaller is what I'm saying. There may be a little bit of annoyance, but we can move ahead. Now let us look at p-hacking and data dredging, different words, data phishing or whatever. So this again, I have personally faced it as a doctoral student. I saw this in my own research, but that is less interesting because it deals with numbers, inventory management. So we'll take one example. If you want to establish the link between chocolate and baldness, you could then get a group of 10,000 men, a pretty big sample size by all accounts, to report on their consumption of these 3 bars of chocolate, M&M, Twix and Mars over a period of time. In addition, you record the rate of going bald in the group over time. Once you have chocolate and baldness data, you can run tests on everything you can think of. Here you had a hypothesis, baldness is caused by eating chocolate. But that word statement can be devised in multiple ways, right? There's time delay. So there are the 2, 3 that they have given is, do men who eat only M&M go bald younger? Other chocolates have other ingredients, we don't know. Do young men who eat both Mars and, so you can develop 10 hypotheses. You know you can do that, right? Baldness and chocolate between them, since there are 3 chocolates, you can have 3 into some 10 different hypotheses. You have 10,000 data points. Do older unmarried men, because you have demographic data there. So first effect nahi aaya, second you look. Do older unmarried men who don't exercise and eat nuts have a lower incidence of baldness? So if you look at data and from all this, ek to aayega, p value aayega, 1%, ek mein aayega. The point is, but it is, so this is called p-hacking. This is a new term I heard from Data Colorado. What I used to call was torturing the data till it confesses to something. So run enough of these tests, you will eventually find something. What do we do about this? Journals are doing something about this. There are concrete steps of what p-hacking involves. You stop collecting data once p.05. You have collected sample size of 30, 40. You had planned to do 100. 30 mein aapko p mil gaya. You stop collecting another. Maybe you collect 1 or 2 more. It is actually reducing your, worsening your p-value. Just stop collecting data. Or you collected another 50, but just don't report it because p-value to aa gaya. Extra data dalne mein problem hi hai to don't. Analyze many measures. If you want to test for normality, there's one test. Try it. You are not getting normal data. Fine, drop it. Who cares? Find another test. There are 2 or 3 alternative tests. At least one of them might agree that it is normal data. Collect and analyze many conditions, but report only those with. I told you, 15 hypotheses between baldness and chocolate. You report one of them. So exclude participants to get P0.1 outliers. You can call them outliers. It's not defined who outliers are. Any inconvenient truth cannot be outlier. You can transform data. Direct effect mein nahi aata, you do logarithmic conversion or something else. So then if this happens, that is one of the reasons why. Now I am realizing, these are questions that I always had as an inquisitive doctoral student when I used to read papers. In 1 or 2 I have actually published a paper in Distance Sciences where I looked at a management science paper. Luckily at that time they used to give raw data, key raw data as an appendix. I did that appendix and I took that data, analyzed it and found that the rival hypothesis actually is equally amenable, and that actually became my research agenda, a 2011 paper in Distance Science. And how I published this, because I was lucky, because it's academia is a cartel. I am from India, so who will agree, listen to a voice that is very discordant. There is a paradigm. My research is questioning the paradigm. Somehow timing was good. At that time some big person was stepped out as editor, some new person came. During that transition I got my foot in, and I am very proud of that work because I looked at, nobody thinks of doing that, no. So published paper in management science, I looked at the appendix and found. So what can we do about this? So all of these problems have solutions. One important thing that is very timely for you to know is, now journals are expecting or at least encouraging pre-registration. What pre-registration means is, what your hypothesis is going to be, what your method of data analysis is going to be, fix it a priori. Those of you who are psychologists with that background, maybe you already know some of it because It started with psychology, it's now slowly coming to business and other social sciences. And there are a couple of websites. One is Data Colada themselves, they've founded this nice website and portal called Wharton Credibility Lab, because the Uri Simonson, he's at Wharton Business School, University of Pennsylvania. So Wharton Credibility Lab. So they have a website called As Predicted. So in As Predicted, you submit your research design anonymized. This is the kind of data sample size I'll collect. Sample size, everything you have to decide a priori. Like 200 means you will collect 200. That number is set. What analysis you will do, what hypothesis you are testing, all of them are pre-set. So that you don't change the rules of the game. Because currently what is happening is you are changing the rules of the game. So that by some or the other rule you are a winner. You can, two people can play kabaddi. You can devise a rule such that the loser is actually winner, right? That will be avoided. This anybody can Google, find out where is the nuance. My experiences, it is again here it's not black and white, especially if some cases where like in my abstract it was given I'm one of the pioneers of neuro operations management. I'm actually the pioneer, the first person to use eye tracking in operations management. Now because I'm a pioneer, I don't have precedence. I don't know what's a good sample size, what is accepted norm, because if I'm the 10th person to follow a certain methodology, there are certain benchmarks. Where in some fields, 10,000 is not enough sample size. For some sort of experiments, 20 may be ample, 10 may be good enough. There are studies, eye tracking studies with sample size of 4. So it really depends on context, and I have no context. I have to, as the pioneer, you have some advantage of innovativeness, but you don't have benchmarks, reviewers are not familiar with it. So I've struggled a lot. Now if I were asked to submit it to As Predicted, I would have difficulty because I don't know how the data will look like. If I'm the 20th person to do a certain survey research, everyone knows what's a survey research. I've done 2 workshops for IRB members. So I have a list of grey areas where there is a gap between the submitters and the reviewers. What are the principles behind that? But those anyway, fortunately our current IRB is the best possible. We've simplified the process, so mostly you will not have any problems. So I'll not cover most of them. Only one that is very important is 90% of your submissions will actually be excused from IRB review. Going as per, there's a lot of thought that has gone behind it. This is one aspect I wanted to really remind you is data storage. When IEC was there, Institute Ethics Committee, where a medical doctor used to be, because their legacy is from, their founding light is from ICMR, Indian Council of Medical Research. So there one of the things they used to do, was one of the statements, tick box that PI had to sign was, we'll destroy the data within 2 years of data collection, 2 years or 3 years. So how many of you will destroy data that you have collected? Your PI has ticked it. I have a problem wherever there are rules which are not enforceable. Don't make such rules which are not enforceable. PI will tick, data will be stored in the institute system. I don't use IIT mail because it goes off once in a while and I lose all data. All my critical data I store on Gmail because I have not had a single mishap with Gmail in my last 15 years since I opened my Gmail account. IIT account I have had crashes multiple times, so I don't store sensitive data on IIT. So I may have tipped that I will only keep use system in IIT server, but I know because I am seeking truth. I am not ashamed of breaking rules. I am breaking rules because I honestly want to preserve my data. I can't risk using IIT data. I don't understand it. Some systems change. At Gmail nothing has changed. Nowadays I started paying some money. I get much more, 100 GB I get. Earlier it was 10 GB for a nominal 200 rupees. But I am just saying how do you store data? So you have signed, your PI has signed that you will destroy data within 2 years. Now imagine what is happening with Francisca. Tomorrow, in India also it happens. There have been cases, right? One famous case I know is IIT Kanpur or Kharagpur, the Sadregla case where there is a faculty member who was nearly fired because he had apparently plagiarized his thesis. But that was another story. There was no plagiarism. But point is, somebody can dig your PhD thesis after 10 years also. Somebody can revoke your PhD thesis also. What will you do with data? Will you destroy it? My thing is, I don't know what logic IEC had that they used to say you have to destroy data within. Destruction is not the point. Point is to preserve. You should preserve it for minimum 10 years. So on one side I am saying we should preserve data, another side IEC is saying we ourselves are not sure what is right. When all these things, when this is the scale of gap in understanding, how can we enforce rules? There was one harsh rule that IEC had, IRB also had, but now we have softened it, is we will never give retrospective approvals. You've done research, done. If you later realize how I should have taken IRB, we are ruthless, very strict about it, will not. There was such a case. How do you handle that? This university has paid stipend, 5 years, student has worked for 5 years. It was not informed to him, he was careless, mistake has happened, but can you deny IRB, means his thesis is out. What would I do? I actually had, when I conducted the first IRB workshop, there was one student and I felt very pained. The system has failed. Now if he honestly says I have not taken IRB approval, our rules are that we will screw that person. It is, and we ourselves don't know. I mean, the previous convener, one of the nicest person, because of which many things happened nicely, but a student like this in the first IRB workshop that we held on January, one student rose and said he is taking IRB approval mandatorily. The convener of the IRB has run for 3 years by then. The convener said, no, it's optional, it is only where external grants are required, the external granting agencies require you to have IRB, that's the reason IRB exists, but in your own interest it is better that you do. Our understanding is any social science research you do under the name of IIT, you've got to take IRB approval. The point is, this is the level of lack of understanding we have. So anyway, I think going forward this should not be, because that student was in his 5th year about to graduate, so I said I'll speak to you outside, I cannot give a response when I'm standing here. Actually after over tea I told him how to handle that situation, and he has graduated and it is end of the story. Because as you saw in that MIT thing, you start throwing stones, then one, if you start investigating, there will be a lot of skeletons. These are not really skeletons, these are bureaucratic hurdles. The person has done an ethical research. There is no plagiarism, there is nothing unethical about the research. Many of these things, are absurd. There have been cases where the student was asked to collect data entirely afresh. What was the methodology? The student had interviewed managers. Did you take informed consent? If I call somebody home, घर पे चाय के लिए बुलाया. Did I take consent that I'll give him tea in porcelain cup? It's like that, because a busy manager will only entertain a person if I want to give response. The person has given an appointment. There's no, there's no misrepresentation or anything. Person is telling, I'm an IT student. I'm studying this topic about your company, how you handle supply relationship. Person has spoken for half an hour and he's told him, I'm recording this. Record ho gaya. Some people say don't record it, it was not recorded. Person has willfully spoken to you. Did you take informed consent that I am speaking from my free ball? As a normal person, I have come here, I have spoken, it means it is implied consent. Implied consent is an actual word in some of the IRBs. We did not have it. So we were insisting, proposal comes, there is no informed consent. When person is themselves coming and giving you responses, that is implied consent. There is no. So context is very important. So these things are all getting improved. So we underwent a major restructuring or revision of our IRB. So going forward these things will be easy. But these are things that you need to remember. Like if you had bad experiences with the previous version of IRB IEC, that is history. We have got to learn. Like I don't think Harvard also learned it one day. They evolved over 10 years, 15 years. We will evolve over 2 to 3 years with the hindsight wisdom. Personally, I am super happy with the current IRB. As I told you, Professor Patankar, she opened this. Otherwise, it was done deal, right? There is an existing system, chal raha hai. There are tens of people who will say we have had very bad experiences because their proposals were stuck for 1 month, 2 months, but collectively there is no action. So individuals were suffering. Now, hopefully, going forward, things will be much easier. So with that, I'll conclude, and I'm open to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Niranjan. And I think this is still even age-wise, it's a new institution within the institution. Lots of confusions. Many things are new for many of us, leave alone for students. Like you're saying, faculty also grapples with what should be in the IRB form, why is it taking so much time? Is it bureaucratic? Are there genuine questions? When it comes back, if there are faculty members here who might have had the experience. But again, thank you so much. It's a long way to go. I think the whole issue of ethics and concerns in research has a long history. If you look at what happened to biomedical research and things like that, so if you come from there. But I think it's a nice start and long way to go. So thank you so much for this, Niranjan. And we'll open this up for discussion, and like we have the rule that we'll have open the house for the students first. So particularly if there are any BTech or master students first, and then we'll move up the hierarchy. Any questions for Niranjan? Except perhaps on the chocolate and baldness collection.
I don't take chocolates.
I was just wondering whether that was a deliberate example or not, but you've answered that. Thank you. Yeah, anyone with any...
The last area where there is a big grey area is the advent of AI. To what extent can we use it in our research? Because everyone else in the world is using it already. It's like called calculator. There, I don't have the expertise. Some members in the IIT need to take this.
So maybe maybe the doctoral students, if you all have had challenges, if there are any doctoral students or questions on the IRB process which you may have completed or have to enter, or anything else. I mean, he's laid out a very interesting story about the challenges that are happening. Yeah, please go ahead. One of us to give you the mic. Can you come ahead half the way? Can you meet you half the way?
Or just speak loudly because others also have to hear that.
So you had mentioned about some case studies where they have plagiarized papers or theses. What is the role of reviewers in this process?
Which reviewers?
The reviewers who review the papers, possibly the papers of FG.
Okay. See, honestly, when a person is of that stature, I don't think peer review is a fair and honest system. It's a lot of click. Oftentimes, what is called as blind review. Peer review is supposed to be blind review. I've been to top behavioral operations conference where in the audience openly they were saying, I reviewed your paper. They're not even ashamed or discreet about it. And I was shocked. A paper has been published and in the audience I was the one who reviewed your paper. So blind review is not happening. Francesca Gino's co-author, Miriam Koshasi something, she is a faculty at Kellogg Business School. Another star. After Francesca Gino, Miriam took over as the chief editor of that top tier journal, OBHTP, where I submitted a paper. It was desk rejected for the most absurd reason. I've had in my lifetime maybe 20 desk rejections. I'm not ashamed of it. It happens. It is part of it. But it must be rejected for logical reason. If you say, if I've submitted something, if it is not interesting, doesn't fit my scope, it should be a logical thing. Quality was there because even higher journals had already reviewed it and rejected it. The reason she said is, she copy pasted as per our editorial statement, we only prefer studies that use multiple methodologies and involve multiple studies. Hence, we are unable to take this forward. We should this. My study, if there is one thing that I am particularly proud about that study was it involved multiple methodologies. Probably the only operations management study that involved case studies and an experiment based on a case study. Normally, people would develop an experiment just like that. But here I did a case study and developed an experiment based on that. And I have incorporated eye tracking for the first time in history that an eye tracking different novel methodology has come into OM. Multiple studies are there and multiple methodologies are there, and that's the ground on which she rejected. After I saw her name as one of the plagiarism issues, the second paper in that data collage, I got very disillusioned. These are the people who are calling the shots. Francisco Gino was the previous chief editor. After that, it was Miriam. So when she handled my paper, was it fairly done? Whereas a lot of other papers that are much simpler, single methodology, they have been published. So that's my answer. Peer review is not a foolproof system. So how did those papers get into? It's a chicken and egg thing. If you are at Harvard, if you are at Wharton, some journals want authors from Harvard to publish so that their own reputation increases. There is one top tier journal that used to proudly say 70% of our authors are from top tier. The journals who I work for have a completely opposite paradigm. That's the reason I have been made a regional editor for Journal of Supply Chain Management, because we understand that the world involves 250 countries. It's not America alone. Every business school, every system has. Some of my profs who I learned from at MBA, who's not published in these top journals, are first-rate scholars. They did not chase publications. They were not in this game, but they were true-blood, truth seekers. Even after retirement, they keep sending me material and things like that because they are intrinsically driven. They don't care for publication and stuff. Gems that even IIT has lots of them. So, peer review is a broken system. It's like chicken and egg thing. If you are in top tier universities, you have an easy entrance. So that's how some of these papers have gotten in. And after you reach a certain level, you are a star. Who will have the guts to? First of all, it will not be blind because everyone knows who that author is, because she or he will have presented it at Academy, one of those big conferences. So everyone knows who's the author. An ordinary, if it comes to me, first of all, it will not come to persons like me for review. But if it comes to somebody from another urban university, they feel comfortable rejecting her paper. They also have that halo effect. अरे उसने इतना किया है, मेरा औकात क्या है उसको reject करने का. So all these things will play. We are all humans at the end of the day. So the other part, plagiarist in the doctoral dissertation, nobody reads an entire dissertation. Let's be real. Except the student, it's not fair also to expect somebody to read 200. You do a high level reading, whether substantively something is new and all that. If you copy pasted 2 paragraphs, don't put the reviewer in a fixed format. Their job is not to do. That's why there is Turnitin and other things. Mechanically we can check them. But if 2 paragraphs, 4 paragraphs have been lifted from somewhere, I personally feel it's not a big deal. Especially if they have cited that paper in that dissertation, which was the case in most of these people, to be fair. They have cited the source. Only thing is they forgot to put the quotes and copy pasted 2 paragraphs. That is bad form, but not enough to fire them, and they are not being fired. They were all of those presidents, they are back to their regular faculty. Only irony is, if a student did that, the student would be chucked out. He would not be given 1 grade lower. Any other questions?
Does it answer roughly your question? Yeah, alright. Okay. Yeah, Shashank. Yeah, also introduce yourself because. No, actually you're not. Is the mic on? Did you press the button? There's a button. ये नीचे नहीं ऊपर है.
The other reason why I hesitated putting my recent study in as predicted is, I know I'm the only one who's like, if you are a pioneer in a field, in the world there is literally 1 or 2, me and my collaborators who are working on that project. Blind review will not happen. The moment I give the methodology, people can easily guess it is me. And I am not affiliated to Stanford or somewhere where I'll get brownie points. I may actually get, who's this guy from this university, from this business school, we don't get papers. So I'll actually have, because I'll be now entering their turf, right? So I'm, until it becomes compulsory, this paper I decided not to submit it. These are all some practical issues that come.
My name is Shashank. I am a PhD student at Siddharth. I have more of a procedural question about getting IRB approvals and following up on our research after that. Also specifically for IIT Bombay's IRB approval. So, for instance,
so what's your question? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
So I took an IRB approval in 2022, and mine is more of an inductive research. So it has evolved. The title has slightly changed. There are some changes in the methods. So do I need to make another IRB approval once the research is finished?
With the current IRB, you don't have to do anything. Just complete your work and submit it. You've done fine scientific work. There's nothing to be apprehensive about. You finish your work and then submit it. That's what I would do.
But then the proposal doesn't match the title final.
So everybody who knows inductive research should know that it evolves. The question itself is not clear. The question itself can evolve as you collect data. So if it goes to a positivist researcher, it can become an issue. So right now the IRB, what does IRB insert? Only a closure report. End of it, submit a closure report and move on. But IEC had that problem, so for one study I have 3 approvals, 3 proposals for one paper. It should be the other way around. Once I have an approval, I should be able to write 2-3 papers from it. But for one paper, just because once I had a collaborator from Australia added, oh, things have changed, submit a new one. So this way, that is not justifiable. With the current IRB, we are very pragmatic. So method evolving, everyone knows inductive research means it will evolve as you go forward. I think that much is there. Somewhere birding is also there. Only if there is a substantial change you have to. The other answer, more technical answer for that is, your review going forward will come under what is called exempt from review. So to start itself, it is the lowest level risk, lower level risk. That does not, by definition, does not require, I had a slide on that also, it does not require approval for any modification. Modification will be done at your level, because this sort of proposals will be only, I am informing you rather than I am seeking full review and approval. We are doing it, it has to be recorded, because again I told you 5-10 years later somebody has to take responsibility for it, but that's about it. So you are free to change your method.
Yeah, anyone else? Yeah, go ahead. So Prathamesh can touch it.
So I took my approval when it was IC 20.
Most of you are not taking approvals, your PI is taking. You can only be a co-signer. Okay.
So at that time,
Closer.
most of the examples that you gave, it were from the data was statistical or quantitative. But when my data is qualitative and already there is a room for interpretation, and in the IEC form, I also had
IEC or IRB?
IEC.
Which year was it?
2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was this informed consent thing, and then so if my participants were not comfortable, I didn't take a written consent, or some interviews I didn't record. So at that time, as like there is a protection of the participant, what can we have as a researcher for to convince the if somebody asks us as a evidence for a research, I just have my own notes which I wrote and then I analyzed it. So how can a researcher then provide evidence for the research? And even I couldn't take much photographs in COVID because
Sometimes you should not take also, because again one side we are saying protect anonymity. The moment you take a picture, there are some. See, I am not IEC or IRB. I am just one member. Often I am arguing, debating with my other members. So my personal views may not at all match IEC or IRBs. I'll tell you one more example. Data has to be protected, sensitive, destroy data, all that tick box we do. Now I give incentives for my experiment participants. IRCC insists that I submit the money received. For eternity, it is in record. If I delete my soft copy, everything, but printed copy where person has signed, I received so and so money with his name is there with IRCC, who is monitoring the data confidentiality of it. These are all some very absurd shackles that we have put upon ourselves. We will keep stumbling. So in that cases, people will break. That's why I said many times the IRB rules are such that they actually stifle honest conduct of research. So specifically what you should do, actually I didn't understand what's your concern. Are you concerned that you are violating IEC's requirement that you have got to take ICF? Or are you concerned about post publication or submission of your research? Somebody may come and ask what is the evidence, what is the concern?
yeah, I have
Both these concerns, there are two concerns here. With IEC, what can I say? I have given you this background. Now, everywhere in IIT or anywhere in the world, if you tell something, they are supposed to act as per the rules. If you put something in email saying I have collected this much data without taking ICF, oh, as per rules you should take. However illogical that rule is, because when you talk to a person, unless it is you are speaking to kids or people who are not able to give consent, when you are talking to somebody and that person is responding, I would assume it is consent. Provided you are told that you are a researcher, you are doing research. That's about it. That's what IRB expects going forward. But because it is a 2020 rule, at that time rule was like that, so it becomes interpretation. I don't have a black and white answer how IEC will treat. If I were you, I will not report it. Who has the time to investigate all these things? And if they investigate, you tell honestly, you've done, this is how qualitative research is done. I would not feel afraid at all. See, you got to bend rules. If you follow traffic rules in Mumbai, you cannot drive. You got to break rules. Police also says many times you are supposed to come outside the red light, white light. Many times you are supposed to come in IIT. You would have seen the red light here, but if you are turning into IIT, you come under the flyover, which is 15 feet. So this is practical. If your conscience is clear, you have done clean research, just go by your gut feel. The same thing applies for your outside. Journals are not going to ask for informed consent. You have taken notes, have preserved them, that is good enough.
I think this question of an informed consent is a very tricky one, and we had this discussion, not going to put anything on paper. And I think this informed consent issue is the largest one in many places. So what I remember discussing is that even if somebody says orally that they are okay, and like Niranjan is saying, if we are, conscience is clear, we are informing them. But it's the problem of somewhere the paperwork could come up as a question.
Could come up, don't raise it. See, I'll give another example that I told. There is, suppose outside gate you find two people physically fighting. You are not taking their names or anything, but in your research you found that the bigger guy got beaten up more by the smaller guy. It's very interesting. It cannot be replicated. Normally the big guy beats the small guy. You observed that. You did an ethnographic study. So this was the dynamics. You submitted it. His identity, his or her identity is not revealed. Who cares for consent? Strictly, if you start applying rules in informed consent, informed consent nahi hota. You go to a conference, some interesting discussion happened, you recorded it. So that's a bit of a grey area. Don't report things because we are not evolved to that level. We should not also. We should not get down to this, because I told you, these are these big issues. People are playing with at Stanford and Harvard. They are playing such big games. Informed consent liya ki nahi ho. This is chicken feed. It is. You should not worry about that. Just do honest research is what I am saying. And so long as your prof backs you, you are the only two people in the system. Others you should not worry.
Right. Anyone else? Himanshu? Yeah, but is it just mic?
I can hear you, but
No, mic is. He's done the.
Thanks, Niranjan. That was really very interesting. I work on my students most of the time. Yeah, I am Himanshu Botte. I teach in CUs. I work largely in the interpretivist method, domain, more exploratory research, etc. And I was heartened hearing you on a lot of these things, because we are always struggling a bit how to even make sense. It makes sense, yes, but how do we negotiate, navigate some of these issues? I have not had any problem managed to do there. But I want to make a point. But how long does your touch last?
Come in. Sorry. The IT mic forever.
So, so my, it's more a reflection in terms of the challenge that
Can you hear it?
faces the IRB. I'm wondering whether there is any effort at or some plans to actually get into to engage the qualitative, interpretive research, ethnographic research, and those domains in a systematic way for these purposes. There are for two reasons. One is there is a lot of ambiguity there, and a concern that was coming up was, ultimately it seems to depend on the particular IRB, the board that is there, in their wisdom. So that is one reason where I think it would be useful to develop these norms, and they will never be of the kind that we have in the IEC, right? They'll have to be very different. But the community of interpretivist social scientists are very comfortable with those norms. So that's one thought going ahead. The other reason is to do with your, the bigger ambition that you were speaking about. You can't be exhaustive in picking up the chicken feed, right? I think the bigger issue here is, as we are having these discussions in the social sciences, about the idea of research and researching down versus researching up, for instance. So for instance, increasingly, we've done enough of going to the informal segments and doing ethnography there. they are pushing back, but they also don't have an option in some sense. You can't walk into a middle class society. So that relationship of the extractivist researcher with the subject, I think that is the bigger ambition. And perhaps if we are looking at a slightly expanded role for the IRB, maybe like with the gender and those efforts at IIT, I think we can also focus on the culture of research, and that I suspect will help smoothen a lot of issues, both at the level of this kind of evaluating or judging, but also in the quality of the approach that people may take. So that is 2 points.
Yeah. Good points. First point, I have a very quick answer. First of all, it is not the IRB's mandate to analyze what the research question is, whether the methodology is appropriate, because we have taken it out of IRB now. It comes under. The only thing is, you should not be dealing with like prisoners, or if that is the case, that informed consent becomes touchy for good reasons. There is a justification. But for normal research, like I am from business school, and if I am doing ethnographic study with whatever managers or something, IRB has no role in that. It comes under what is called excuse category. So your solution is one level higher, that IRB should have the expertise to evaluate and judge your. It's not our job. So long as it is zero risk, you are talking to managers are adults, willfully they are giving you a response. Research design methodology, that's your mandate. So that problem is completely solved. The second one that you are saying, can you capture the essence of the second question? I didn't fully get it.
Basically, the IRB is here, as you said, to protect, or the whole mechanism is to protect participants. Now, the discussions in the social sciences we are extracting from participants, okay, as researchers who parachute into it. And so there's an ethical question at that level.
Okay.
And so I'm not suggesting that this can go into, but this is a bigger.
Now let's read this slide, because this is another very important slide, a favorite of mine that I put together from different sources. Is earlier IRB, the paradigm was you should not study any vulnerable people. Like the moment it is vulnerable, you have to jump so many more hoops. The point is, does that mean you don't touch upon sensitive? Actually, the real impact is there. One important study that Dan really did in his book is he studies how when you are sexually aroused, your usage of contraceptive among teenagers, students. He did a practical study. He gave laptops and pornographic material, and he did this study. It's there in his book. Now, some people with some very puritanical mind, sex adolescents. But adolescents are the ones that are getting into teenage pregnancy. Except maybe 0.01% of us, all of us were born by the act of union between a male and female, adults doing research. We can't be very, amateurish about this thing. So, the earlier paradigm with IE said, you're studying death victims, you're studying cyclone victims, they're vulnerable people. So, how do you ensure? If you start asking all these questions, the researcher will feel, let's not get into that space at all, let's do something. But the real impact is here. So many times the argument that was given, not in this IRB, generally speaking, is, these are taboo subjects, we should stay away. Suicide, if you talk to them, what if they commit suicide because you spoke to them? That risk can happen anytime. In IEC, I remember, they've developed a prosthetic or something. What if they fall? I mean, their whole research is about that. Testing mobility means there will be a person to support and all. But us time there was a doctor, a brilliant doctor, otherwise I trust her, but in IRB, very funny question, what if he undergoes a heart attack? Do you have insurance? And I actually told in the IRC, Bahar itna crowded, people can slip and fall. My colleague actually, I wrote on discuss faculty, there's a pit and she fell and fractured her. Monsoon, we are exposed to 10 times more risk outside. We are smoking 2 packs of cigarette outside every day anyway with the pollution that we have. These are facts. As scientists, we cannot deny these things. So, just because you are IAC, you asked, is there insurance? What if that person falls down? So, these exceptions are there, but these 3 examples are very telling. So, you should not study, what are the examples? They indicated that sometimes when they interviewed suicide, look at the second bullet. A multidisciplinary team, including APS fellow Michael Furr, Wake Forest, found that adolescent psychiatrist patients showed a drop in suicide ideation after being questioned regularly about their suicide thought. current thought was suicide victim, we're vulnerable, I don't do that research. Are you trained to do that? One of my colleagues' proposal was rejected because he does research on yoga and mindfulness. He's a big shot guy in that. Academy also cites his work. But initially, IRB or our school's ethic committee turned back saying, are you an expert in conducting yoga? Yogasta conducts. Who asked their qualification? Common sense. For online, you can, for 200 rupees, you are doing. When Prime Minister says half the country is doing yoga, it should be practical and ethical. No, where does science go if we start talking like that? So they actually asked him. He has a rich background. He's publishing in top journals, studying the effect of yoga and wellness, and not the physical acrobatic yoga where you can actually sprain. This is normal mental yoga. So the point being, though people should not be discouraged by about studying sex, trauma and other sensitive topics, because the argument cuts both ways. Okay, it can increase, it can decrease, unless there is scientific evidence, common sensical, that you are asking a question that will lead people to commit suicide. Don't shy away from doing such research, because there is good arguments that like they are not taboo. They should not be taboo. IRB, we keep talking about it. The current IRB, I think, will not treat it as a taboo, because otherwise.
Response is that any further question? All right. Anyone else? Maybe we can take one last question.
Yeah.
Any faculty members? Any other? Nothing at all.
Okay, it was my pleasure, Pankaj. Thank you so much. It's a very topical.
First step. We have a little gift for our speakers. So I'm going to invite Head Sitara.
Pankaj, going forward, see, this is like a very vast topic, right? Each of them, IRB itself I can conduct or someone else can conduct. So you should have more follow-up topics.
And the IRB should do something within the IRB. So we have this little hand-woven scarf from Magan Sangralaya in Wardha, which is along the lines of Sitara's mandate of handicraft and rural livelihood. So this little token of our appreciation, I'm going to request Head, who's always reluctant, but the first not the seminar. No, good reason. But as the first seminar for the series, this is a small approach.